One of my favorite quotes is that God throws us into deep waters, not to drown us, but to cleanse us. And there's going to be many people very cleansed by the end of this whole process. But in order to deal with adversity and to build character, one must show dignity and graciousness in everything that they do. And I implore all of you to show that graciousness and that dignity, and to show those elements, those characteristics of character that we expect of all students and all productive citizens in our society. We need to avoid exaggerations and untruths. And we need to make sure that the statements that we make and the positions that we take are benchmarked and based on data and facts. And we must all be kind to each other. We also have to make sure that we employ the best behavior that we can so that others are not damaged or hurt around us. Now, I know that a lot of the places downtown are beginning to want to take advantage of this current situation and take advantage of some of your free time. We know the bars are opening up a lot earlier. I've seen the specials that are being offered with strike-related drinks. And I know it's going, it's fun. But I implore you to conduct yourselves as responsible adults. If you're of age, it's fine to go downtown and to enjoy yourself, but please, please be careful. Don't congregate in large groups on those street corners with cars zipping by with horns blowing. Don't abuse alcohol, because that often results in injury, illness, and sometimes acting inappropriately, wherein the police have to come down and become involved in the actions that are occurring. So please act as responsibly as you can as we go through these next few days. Dr. Hilton and his team have numerous activities available all over the university. There's all kinds of things to do on this campus, as I talked about in my remarks. And so please look at all the possibilities out there for things that you can do, not just going downtown and enjoying yourself there. Now, some history about the last 5 or 6 years. About 5-6 years ago, Kutztown University had about 10,700 students. The system had 115,000 students. We're riding a high in state funding, in resources coming into the university. Then what happened? We got hit with a terrible recession. Along with that recession came cutbacks at the state level. In 1 year, the system and Kutztown lost 18% of their budget. In addition, we hit a demographic plateau of the number of 18-year-olds going to school, and those numbers began to go down. So there were fewer students available to go to our 14 universities. In addition, there was lots of competition from competing universities as well. A lot of online programs were springing up at that time, online universities. And so over the years, with the major budget cuts, falling enrollment, there began to occur a great distress on the system and on Kutztown University in terms of our budget and our ability to make ends meet. Now, many universities resorted in layoffs and workforce reduction 4 or 5 years ago. And it resulted in a major drop in morale. But essentially, my predecessors had to make ends meet. They had to be able to pay the bills. And so I believe we lost altogether about 110 positions 4 or 5 years ago. And that included actually laying off a fairly large number of people, and that happened at other places as well. So that's the situation that we were in as I came into the presidency last year. We were still recovering from that very, very difficult time. Now, to understand how a university is funded, a university is funded based on the following elements. State appropriation. Now, about 18 years ago, the state appropriated money to pay about 75% of our budget, our E&G budget. Currently, for Kutztown, it's about 26%. a major drop in our funding from the state. System-wide, it's about 25% that the state government gives to us. So if you don't have that state money anymore, how do you pay your bills? How do you pay your faculty salaries? You raise tuition is one way you do it. And so tuition's gone up a lot over the years. It costs a lot more to go to school now than it did 15, 18 years ago. It costs more to go to school now than it did 5 or 6 years ago when we were going into that terrible recession and we had those really big budget cuts. The other thing that you can do in this situation is to cut. Okay, you don't have much money coming in from the state. If you raise tuition too much more, your enrollment will continue to go down because students can't afford to go to school. And so you cut your budget. And as I said, about 80% of our budget is personnel. I'm looking at Jerry. And so that's where all the money resides, or most of the money resides, is in personnel, in salaries, in the workers. And so here at Kutztown, quite a few people were laid off and positions were lost. You cut programs. So in order to save money, a number of programs were cut here at Kutztown University. A lot of programs and services that served all of you directly were cut. With regard to first-year experience programs, advising programs, and lots of special, unique programs that fall under Warren Hilton's area were cut in order to save money and try to project as much money as we can to classroom activities. So that's where we found ourselves in going into this negotiation period, is a real budget crisis. Now, while all this is happening, prices are continuing to go up. Salaries go up. Inflation, you all know what inflation is. Costs go up. And our enrollment kept going down. You've often heard me say that every 100 students we lose is $1 million loss just in tuition and fees, $1 million a year. And so my job and the job of my cabinet, and looking at it system-wide, the job of the chancellor and the board of governors, and working with Charlie, our council of trustees, is to try to balance all these things out so that we can literally balance our budget. Now, we've been running in deficit the last few years, and so it's been a real struggle to balance our budget. So when we went into negotiations a year and a half, 2 years ago, the system's primary interest was to indeed give pay raises, but to give pay raises and other compensation and benefits within a range that would not bankrupt the system and not push several universities over the edge into bankruptcy, and also that would not force universities to have to rely on workforce reduction and cutting programs that are there for students, and also to not have budget constraints placed on us that are so great that we're going to have to raise your tuition not 2.5%, but much, much higher than that. And so that's the reality. That's the bare facts of what happened as we began the negotiations. Now, there's been a lot of give and take, and there's been a lot of benchmarking through the course of the last year, year and a half, 2 years. Now, one of the things that happen in negotiations is pattern bargaining. Now, a deal happened with AFSCME. That's the largest union in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. They have about 50,000 members, as well as other unions, wherein a certain benchmark of salary increases was accepted by the state with corresponding increases in health care contributions by those state employees. So what's been happening in negotiations in Harrisburg is discussions about how we can try to model our contract on the basis of what's happening all over the state with all other state employees. The way it all came out, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know, if you just go on the system website, it's all explained. What this all came down to is that there's about an average 12% increase that faculty will get in pay, which is pretty darn good under these very, very difficult times. About a 12% increase over the next 3 years, with the understanding that there are some concessions that will allow a little bit of that money to be saved that can go back into their salaries. And along with that is that the union leadership or the union would accept the same health care benefit that all the other employees in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania now have. And so those are the dynamics. Now, in terms of other things that were discussed, most of the other things that were discussed had to do with ways in which we could save money. And what happens if we save money? We're able to pay the higher salaries that our faculty want. And what happens if we save money? We don't have to raise your tuition. And what happens if we save money? We don't have to eliminate positions and programs at the university in order to take money from there and give it to salaries and to cover benefits. So that's basically what has been going on. Yes, we'd like to give faculty as much money as possible, but at the same time, we don't want to raise tuition, we don't want to cut more programs, and it's highly unlikely we're going to get very much more money from the state. We are grateful to Governor Wolf because he has increased our budget in each of the last 2 years, a small amount. I think about $30 million over 2 years. But our budget's like $2 billion or something to that effect. And so the state is struggling as well. The taxpayers also don't want their taxes raised. And so, again, everything is balanced out. So it's not a question that we're trying to say, no, we don't want anyone to have a pay increase. We do want people to have a pay increase, but also we have to be cognizant of the cost of that pay increase. The last thing I'll say, and then I'll open up for questions, is I've engaged in a great deal of collective bargaining through the course of my career. I spent 20 years engaged in collective bargaining, both on the union side when I was a faculty member and then as an administrator. And there's a basic principle when you bargain collectively. And I always engaged in principled or positive negotiations. That's that you identify a problem. What you do then is you look at each side's interest and common interests between them. And then you identify options, ways in which you can solve the problem there and also satisfy the common interests. And then you establish standards of legitimacy. You do the research, you gather the data, and you benchmark against other systems and other schools and the way things are done across the nation. And then you arrive at a common option, and then you're both committed to it. And an important element to this is you both own it. It's both of you claim ownership of that final decision. And a key element as well is the personal relationships. You always treat each other with dignity and respect and graciousness, which is where I began. So that's the way we want negotiations to occur. We believe the system has tried to always treat the union with graciousness and respect in all communication that we have had. And in terms of benchmarking, what the system has tried to do, and if you go on the website, you will see this. It lays out the data and the facts. Yes, we'd like our faculty to make more money, but our faculty are among the highest paid faculty at comprehensive universities in the country. And so that is a fact. Even our temporary faculty and our adjuncts are among the highest in the country. And so that's a benchmark. That's a fact. And so that's what the system tries to look at in coming up with the package that they offer to the union. Okay, I'll stop there because I want to make sure that all of you are able to ask questions. Josh?
Anybody has a question? Raise your hand with your mic.
So you mentioned a couple times about how this is predominantly about pay for the staff, and multiple times APSCO has said that this isn't about pay or benefits or anything. It's more about how you want to increase workload, or how the state, I guess I should say, wants to increase workload, but for temporary faculty, while also getting rid of teachers now in favor of temporary faculty. What do you have to say about that?
Okay. I'll go back to the statement about benchmarking. So the question is, when you look at temporary hires at universities across the country, what is a normal workload? And so when you try to save money, is asking for an increase in workload whereby you'll save a significant amount of money, is that one of the ways in which we can recover enough money to be able to pay for the pay increases of the others? That was one option. The system, I believe, and I'll speak for myself, but the system, I believe, was looking for all kinds of options in order to save money. That was one option. And that option, actually, if you'll read the system's press releases, it's not on the table anymore in terms of increasing workload. But that was a way of saving money. It was not just, oh, let's make people work harder. But by doing that, there would have been millions of dollars saved system-wide that could have then gone to help pay for these pay increases. In terms of increasing the number or the percentage of temporary hires, that would not have affected Kutztown. We have about 21% of our faculty who are temporary hires. But there are some schools in true distress right now in our system. And they wanted to give the administration a little more flexibility during those stressful times. Let me tell you something, and you may not realize this. Every tenure track faculty member that we hire, that is about an average of $3 million through the course of that career. $3 million for every faculty member in their compensation in today's dollars. And so if a university is in distress, rather than making a commitment for 30 years on into the future, because I'm figuring average 30 years, a faculty member will work, rather than making a $3 million commitment for that one individual, if they're in distress, the administrations would like the flexibility through those difficult times to maybe have a few extra temps before they have the amount of money to make the decision to make a long-term commitment. And you know, when it comes to someone like me and the other presidents and vice presidents, we don't think in the here and now and in the present. We think in terms of decades and what the effect our decisions will have going off into the future. Many of you have heard my speeches, and I've often spoke of what an institution means. Our job is to serve the institution in the broader sense of the term. An institution means respecting its history, but also guarding its future and to make sure it's healthy. And so what the system was asking for was a little more flexibility. And so that's the reason why they were asking for that. Next question. I'll let the people at the microphones choose.
I heard a rumor that if this strike lasts longer than 2 weeks, that our semester does not count.
That's not true. Okay? That's not true. And I'll give you, again, benchmarking, data, real-life situation. I believe it was last year, Bloomsburg was shut for 2 weeks because of a flood. They finished on time. Now, it's possible if it was to go for a very, very long time, then we have to look at what the possibilities are or what the damage will be that will be done. But in terms of 2 weeks, 2 weeks should not have an effect on us being able to finish our courses. Okay. You know, sometimes your faculty member are sick for a prolonged period and they miss 5 or 6 class days. Sometimes they're at a conference. So 2 weeks is not the benchmark for this. Mm-hmm.
I know you mentioned budget deficits, and that's why the strike is occurring. My first question is, with building remodeling occurring, such as South Dining Hall, and I know they talk about upgrades to the business building in a couple of years, education is being cut, but remodeling to these buildings are occurring. How does that weigh out the current situation?
Sure, that's a great question. And let me explain that there are different types of pots of money. And these different pots cannot be moved from one pot to another. The renovation of the dining halls and the residence halls, that's in what's called the auxiliary budget. That is your money. That money is raised through student fees, what you pay for your dining and for your room and board and other fees that you pay. You cannot take that money and use it to pay for faculty pay increases or for programs, or actually for anything outside of its purpose. And Molly and student government over the years, they play a very big role in deciding how that money is spent. But they could never say you have to spend it to support salaries or academic-related items. Now, in terms of other renovations, such as DFRAN, the business building, we have an aging infrastructure here on campus. And if you listen to a lot of your faculty, they'll complain in the winter that it's absolutely freezing, and in the summer it's way, way too hot, and that there's mold growing because we have old pipes, old electrical wires. We have offices that are now too small and classrooms that are too small. And even in the house that Anne Marie and I live in, built in 1929, soon after we moved in, one of the pipes in the upstairs bathroom, 1929, just broke and flooded down all the way down to the first floor and did a lot of damage. And twice now, the opposite, the sewage came up in the basement, made a mess of everything stored down there because the building is 90 years old. Many of these buildings are very, very old. And so it's absolutely necessary we do the renovations necessary to be able to make them safe and accessible for you and for the faculty. I mean, it's a hard decision. Do we give faculty a larger pay increase, or we continue to pay more money for health insurance? Or do we make sure that the air conditioning and the heating work in the building? That's what we try to do, and that's what we try to balance. Okay?
And my second question is, with classes being cut for one day so far, is there going to be any type of tuition reimbursement or make up for these classes?
No, there would not be, because you're paying tuition for an entire semester, and you'll often have periods in a class where you won't be in class every single class meeting, such as if your faculty member is sick, such as your faculty member goes to a conference. And as I said in my video, the college experience is more than going to classes. What you're paying for are all these beautiful buildings, for the waterfall at the Alumni Plaza, for all the activities going on, for the sporting events, for the music events. And so, yes, one element of your university experience is being disrupted, but there's many, many other elements that are still vibrant and available to you. And what I hope you'll do is if indeed your professors do not show up for work, that you then shift some of your emphasis to some of these other things that maybe you haven't had time to do, but that are still very rewarding for your university experience.
So I have two questions. One, D2L went down last night for some of us, and that is back this morning, or was back this morning to Max Dentist and Ginger. But some of us had quizzes that needed to be done that were then closed. What would those people be able to do? If there was an alternative assignment, could they come over late, or I don't know if you'd be able to answer that.
I'll give a brief answer, and then I'm going to ask Dr. Zayats to talk about that, because that kind of falls under her area. Remember when I talked about showing dignity and graciousness when you deal with adversity? Well, sadly, some faculty directly removed content and basically tried to prevent the use of D2L for their students. Now, I think we've been able to correct most of that, but in terms of the technical aspects, I'll let Dr. Zayats explain.
So who had the question? I'm sorry. Okay. So yes, what happened before yesterday is some faculty actually turned off your D2L classes. That was discovered yesterday, and all the courses are now turned back on. But as you pointed out, some of the faculty have taken down parts of their courses, and they are that is theirs to do. What I am hopeful is that when they come back, that they will put those things back up for you. I am very saddened that they couldn't let you continue to do some work, but we would At this point, D2L is there. If you're having trouble, if any student is having trouble accessing D2L, if you go on the D2L help, the staff that's here at Kutztown is monitoring that. I spoke with them several times today. I will speak with them tomorrow morning as well for any issues that come up overnight. Does that help?
Yeah, that's helpful. And then I have one more question. We have openings, like, specific classes that's coming up, and we need to talk to an advisor about choosing those classes. Is there an alternative? What do we speak to?
I'm going to turn it back to Dr. Zayats because the advising falls under academic affairs, and she might be able to give a more precise answer.
I believe what we will do is to determine how long the strike will last, and then we will be adjusting the window for you to register for classes. That will be adjusted as it goes forward. I do understand that some of you have already spoken to your advisors. I understand that there were some advisors that were proactive and actually had advisement times ahead of time. But we will make sure that those windows stay open longer so that it does not impact students. Okay?
And it is my hope that faculty will not do anything that will hurt you long term. We understand that right now we're in a difficult period, but everyone should be looking to what happens after this strike ends, and so that no one is prevented from being able to progress in their academic career. Okay, next question. Matt's got...
Hi, George Latham from Student Government Board, Visual and Performing Arts Representative.
Yes.
Yeah, cool. One question that...
It's your senator.
About, they've asked, specifically today, how have negotiations gone? Has there been any negotiations between either side? And has there been made any advancements in the negotiations?
Okay, I'm going to have to apologize to you. I just can't answer any of those questions. And this is where I'm going to have to just suggest that you continually go on the system website or the university website or the FSCUF website for updates to find out, what's going on and what's breaking in any given minute. But I can't talk about that. I'm so sorry.
Hello. Has Tom Wolf or any state representative done anything in terms of mediation towards what's going on in the state?
I can only let me just refer to what's actually in the press, and the governor has tried very, very hard to encourage sides to come together using the process that I explained earlier, to be able to come to a place where you're meeting common interests within the range or the parameters that we're dealing with this budget. And I think the governor would like, I know the governor did not want to strike. The governor wanted negotiations just to continue, and he's to be praised for that. There are legislative leaders on the Board of Governors, a Republican senator and representative and a Democratic senator and representative, and then there are several governor appointees and representatives. And so our legislature and our governor are very active in all aspects of what's going on. Mm-hmm. Okay. I will take that. Thanks. Thanks, Toya.
Okay, so I have two questions. It's me again, by the way. Hi. The first one actually has to do with what you were talking about earlier with the two separate budgets between faculty salary and building renovations. I live in school, and we were actually just renovated 2 years ago, right? Something like 2 years ago, whatever. We don't have air conditioning, so we're just wondering why the newer buildings have air conditioning that are for the education, but the newer buildings don't, which is where we spend a fair chunk of our time.
Let me answer that one first, and I'll give you the second one. It was cost, but I'm going to let Vice President Silberman say a few words about that because I wasn't here when those decisions were made.
I wish it wasn't like 85 degrees outside right now. We're like more like 30 maybe. But we looked at installing air conditioning in some of our traditional halls when we started a renovation. The problem with doing that for the halls, they're all constructed out of concrete block, so it's really difficult to run the HVAC pathways throughout the facility. So it's millions of dollars, which would have increased housing fees beyond the point where a lot of our students would have been able to afford. So that's why we did not install air conditioning in those facilities, so we could keep the heat down, and hopefully the weather's not so bad. You know, it's a little warm in September, not usually in October, and then we're good pretty much the rest of the year.
Okay, and your second question?
You mentioned earlier about the whole thing with the temporary faculty. So, what was the state's, I guess, whole thought process behind having graduate students teach labs in certain classes?
Okay, yeah, I was disappointed with the way that that was being presented. What the fact, and you can read this right on the website, is that, the system proposed allowing graduate students who have completed 18 hours of graduate work, so not graduating seniors, but grad students with 18 hours of work, to serve as assistants in laboratories with the approval of the supervising faculty member. Okay, in my view, this was a faculty-friendly situation where faculty would have grad students helping them if they want, because faculty could approve to have those grad assistants or not. Virtually every one of your faculty members were a grad assistant or a teaching assistant, master's and doctoral program. I was a teaching assistant in my master's and doctoral program. It's a rite of passage. It's a way that graduate students can develop the credentials to be able to get a job after they finish graduate school. It's an important opportunity for some grad students, such as those who can work in labs, to be able to get the credentials that will help them get into a doctoral program. So this was really a very positive proposal that would help faculty and help students. I am just perplexed as to why that was not agreed to. Josh, okay.
So there's a lot of education majors here, and I know I'm trying to apply for changes in fee. Is that even possible during the strike, or do I have to wait?
For what?
Apply for changes in fee for teaching. I'm in the midst of applying for it. Am I still capable of doing that during the strike, or do I have to wait? Because I know there's a lot of ed majors.
Okay, I'm going to have Dr. Zayats again answer that question.
I can probably put that here. Okay. You should be contacting your dean, Dr. Taidawa, and in the dean's office. Do you know where that is? In DC? Yes? No? Okay, and then you should be contacting Dr. Kish in the dean's office in business department. Can you do that? Okay, you know what those are?
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
So, you were talking about how future-oriented you are and how benchmarks are so important. I really agree. So I was hoping maybe since the 2-week rumors now have been debunked, is there a time period, because I've been told the university has a plan in place if this were to occur, now it's occurring. So my question is there a time period at which point we can't just pretend it was a flood or pretend it was a snowstorm or something like that? Is there like a date, a certain date that's set, or a ballpark date where 2 weeks is fine, 3 weeks is fine, 6 weeks we have to start talking about extending the semester kind of deal? Because I also am trying to plan for my future and plan for my internship in the spring. So I'm interested in knowing what the benchmark is before we have to like resort to date that isn't just snowstorms or floods or whatever.
Okay, there are so many variables in place, it's hard to nail that down. And let me just try to give you a practical example If 100% of the faculty are out 2 months from now, let me use an extreme, it's going to be very hard to continue to function. If 2% of the faculty are out 2 months from now, we will be fully functioning. And then you can kind of look at all the variables in between, and then you also look at many, many, many other variables that would come into play and leading us to make a judgment as to whether or not the university could no longer function and continue. For the right now, for the foreseeable future, we will be open and will be fully functional to the extent that we can with a number of faculty who are out on strike. I'm sorry I can't give you more information. The information, the variables will change day by day, and it won't be like that. We'll begin to see a trend as we go forward, and we'll be able to give you more information as we get closer and closer to that breaking point, if it should ever come. Mm-hmm.
Hi. So I know you're really pushing everybody to go to class no matter whether the teacher's there or not. I've heard conflicting answers for both sides and different reasoning. If students do not go to class, how does that actually affect financial aid? I've heard FSCUP say that since financial aid has already been distributed, they can't take it away versus Patchy saying that they can take it away. What is the actual situation?
Mm-hmm. It should not affect financial aid. And I have Bernard here. Bernard, do you want to say anything about this? Bernard's in charge of financial aid. And let me say one other thing about going to class. That's ultimately your decision, as it always is. Your professors set the attendance policy for the most part in each of your classes. I mean, in terms of whether or not you're penalized for being in class or not. The reason why we say you should go to classes, we just don't know if your faculty will be there from day to day. Even if they're out the first day, they may come back the next day. That's why it's important for you to go to class. Let me say, even the system-wide union president, he said on a video last night that students should go to class. And so I think anybody who's responsible is going to encourage students to go to class if they can. But students still have to use their own judgment. And if they feel they know with certainty that their professor's not going to be there and they live an hour away, then they take those variables into consideration, and then they decide what's the best course of action for them. Okay, Bernard, do you want to talk about financial aid?
Thank you. Under no circumstances at this current moment will we be taking any financial aid from any student. The only way that will occur is, say, you, the student, decide to withdraw from the university. Then you will be subject to what we would call a refund calculation that the federal government says we would have to perform based on the time that you withdraw. So if you withdrew today, we would have to do that calculation and determine what aid you had earned up until this point. And then we would give you the aid that you had earned versus the charges you had incurred up until this point, and then we would have to return money. Now that could leave students owing a balance to the university, because you can only earn X amount of dollars up until the point that you withdraw. But and we've heard lots of stuff. I had a student tell me today, we did a proration of aid every day. We do not. Aid is aid. Whatever you earn, that's what you get. Whatever you're eligible for, that's what you receive. That's what we have dispersed. For the majority of people in this room, we have dispersed all of your aid, unless we're still waiting on information from you. But for the majority of you, it's already been done. We will not be taking any aid. There is a scenario we will have to face if it goes to whatever that breaking point is. But then that's a decision between PACHI, each university, and the Federal Department of Education.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Hypothetically, if it would go on long enough, do you have steps in place for who are planning to graduate in December that you kind of need to graduate because you're going to start another type of schooling come spring?
That's another question where I'm sorry I don't have a definite answer because there's so many variables. And in that situation, we would have to look at the unique needs of that particular student. For example, let's say you have 5 classes and 2 of your professors are working. So there's 3 classes in question. And those other classes, can they be finished partially through independent study? Can you get caught up? Is the professor, when she or he comes back to work, willing to work with you to get through to the end? I know on the administration side, we will do everything in our power to make sure that our students can graduate at the end of the semester when they're supposed to graduate. Everything in our power. There could be some things that's beyond our power. Right now, I don't anticipate that students should be harmed to the extent that they will not be able to graduate at the end of the semester. But you see, these are the kinds of questions that everyone needs to ask themselves when they do something so serious as to make the decision to go out on strike. Is the situation so bad that you're willing to shut down the university and put at risk the mission that the university performs? And is it so bad to call for a strike? And, the other thing is the situation so bad that everyone's willing to deal with the very, very negative feelings that could result at the end? Let me say, I'll do everything in my power to bring about healing of all relationships at the end of this strike between students and faculty and faculty and students and faculty and administration and townspeople and everybody I can. I'll try to bring about as many opportunities for people to heal. But it's such an enormous risk to go out on strike because of the incredible harm that can be done as a result. Okay. Josh?
I have a question that you can answer. In the video that you posted at 5 a.m., I did watch that testimonial. You dismiss the strike in a way by comparing it to a sick leave. Don't you think that was a little bit insensitive considering that healthcare is a great concern for a lot of faculty members with chronic illnesses and families?
I think if you watch the video again, I say that missing class for a day or 2 days or however, initially when the strike begins is similar to a faculty member being sick or gone on a business trip. And so that was not dismissing the strike itself. It was trying to inform students as to the fact that missing just a few days does not mean that the entire course cannot still be completed. So that was my reference. I just spoke of how important I felt the strike was. And in terms of healthcare benefits, you all are watching the news. We have a serious problem with the cost of healthcare in this country. My goodness, it's going through the roof. Companies are dropping out of even providing healthcare. The costs are astronomical. And we have a Cadillac program here. We have one of the best programs in the state. And again, if you just look at the website, we're asking for a $5 to $15 more payment on the part of faculty in a pay period and some higher deductibles. But we're not taking health care away from anyone. That's never been on the table in terms of our faculty. Yes.
Okay, so I believe statistics said that about at least 90% of all professors at all 14 state schools are on strike currently. I don't know how true that is, but it said that 90-something% are willing to go on strike. Today, I had 3 classes and all 3 are on strike. Tomorrow, I believe both professors will be on strike. So my question is, what incentive will professors have to come back from the current strike situation without negotiations being completed?
We won't know for certain how many faculty are on strike, probably for another day or two, because it's the way the system works. Like, there may be professors who don't teach on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, so we don't, we'll know tomorrow how many walk out. But in terms of how long that we would go on with that many faculty going out, the thing, again, that we don't know is how many will come back after a day or two. The faculty have taken a great risk by going out on strike. They lose their pay, and as you point out, they lose their health care. That is Pennsylvania law. And so we just have to know, as the facts become clear, as more information is being put out, it's entirely possible that faculty will make the choice that indeed, the question I asked earlier, is it really worth it, considering all the circumstances, that many will begin to come back to work. Again, we just don't know that right now. In time, we will know it.
And my second question is, with students who are commuters and travel, anyone who travels time out of their day to come to class, and professors not willing to discuss the strike with their students, and yet those students still come up to show up to class, even driving at least an hour away, so they can get a quality education, pay thousands of dollars, just to see a new professor.
Mm-hmm. This is where I'm going to refer to what I said earlier. That's where they're going to have to make the judgment themselves as to whether or not they want to come in, because we don't know if the faculty member will be there. It's by hour, we don't know who will come and who won't come. Now, ideally, the professors would not punish a student if they are in class, if they are teaching, and students come or don't come. Like if they require attendance, they won't require attendance because they'll keep in mind the circumstances of what's happening right now. But in those kinds of situations, again, I just have to rely on the student to use his or her own judgment.
So it's just up to the student whether they spend the gas money to come to class to see if the professor will be there or not be there?
Well, as I said earlier, if their only reason for coming is to go to class and they have a high expectation the professor won't be there, that should help inform their decision as to whether or not they want to come. But if they want to come and make use of the library and the computer labs and do other things on campus, to use that time in a different way, and they still find value in doing those other things, then I would recommend that they come. Okay. Okay, 2 more questions.
You've been talking about potential consequences of going on strike against professors. Is there an actual consequence, and will there be any kind of reprimanding from the state or from the university?
Absolutely not. There won't be any consequence or retaliation that will be tolerated on my part for anyone who went on strike, and also for anyone who chose not to go on strike. And I have already made that clear in statements that I've made. To do either one is an honorable thing, and it's a question of personal choice. And I will ensure in the evaluation process and in all other ways in which we interact with faculty that no one will be punished for making a decision in either direction. And if I hear of any retaliation of any kind, I will come down as hard as I possibly can on that person who's retaliating, whether it be in either direction. I think we have one more question.
Well, hello, Dr. Hawkinson.
Hi there.
I just have a question. How do you feel as president? I think I understand the solidarity you're saying with the professors and everything, but how do you feel as the president, per se, having administration be to blame for the strike?
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel? What is your opinion about this?
Sure. It's heartbreaking to me. It's devastating. From the day I accepted the position, for those of you who are here, I gave a speech about place, and that the whole reason why I chose the position here is in Kutztown is because I have this philosophy that when you put values with space, it makes place, and that I felt that Kutztown University had a true community and had values wherein people would come together and share together and go on this educational journey together to truly have a place where people can grow and learn. You know how I feel about educating students, if you've heard my inauguration speech. And so this has been so very, very difficult to walk in on this situation. And a lot of my time and all my cabinet's time for months now has been diverted to deal with these issues. And it breaks my heart to see all of you and the 8,600 students on campus to have to go through all this stress. And I mean, these months should be spent on all these initiatives that we've put in place. You know, our enrollment is still falling. There's so many things that we want to do, and being able to go out to the high schools and develop new relationships and to recruit new students and new programs and the foundation director and raising new money for scholarships to make life easier. And yet we're spending so much of our time and energy on dealing with this strike situation. So it's very, very difficult. And quite frankly, a lot of my time as we go forward is going to be spent trying to heal and repair the relationships that are going to result from this. So it saddens me, but it doesn't mean that I'm not still absolutely delighted to be here, because this will pass. This will pass. And in time, we'll be able to redirect our attention to the directions that we had set before this even began. And thank you very much. That was a very kind question. Thank you. All right. If you have further questions, you can email me. I encourage you to look at the different websites, get as much information as you can. I'm going to be walking around campus. I look forward to seeing you. I'm sorry this is happening. I apologize to each and every one of you that this has happened. And we will do our best to make things right as we go forward. Thanks so much.